It's unfortunately very easy for people to find your information online, and that includes your phone number, whether it's already on the internet public to everybody or available for purchase on websites like White Pages. If you're getting text from an unfamiliar number, it's usually safe to assume it's a scam or someone you might not want to be talking to. A 20-something-year-old girl from Los Angeles, who I'll refer to as Tina, was using an online dating app called OkCupid. She had matched with a guy named Richard, age 26, tall, black hair, average build. Tina says he looked pretty attractive in his pictures, which he had 4 of on his profile, which were all of him posing in different places. One with his dog, one in his car, one selfie, and one in front of a scenic waterfall. He lived only a couple miles away from Tina, and the two messaged back and forth for a while in the app, mingling over how long they've lived in the city for and where they've been to, etc. Eventually they exchanged numbers and started texting, with Richard quickly suggesting the two go on a date. Some of the text read as follows: "What are you up to tonight?" "Taking care of my dog and then relaxing. I'm exhausted." "Okay, I was gonna ask if you wanted to go on a date or something." "Not tonight. What about tomorrow though?" "Yeah, that works for me. We can go to the Stalking Horse. I think that's like right in the middle of both of us." "Yeah, that works." So the two agreed to a date the following night at a brewery that's not far from either of them. The conversation continues to go completely normal as the two are on their way to the bar. While Tina is on her way in an Uber, it appears that Richard may possibly be walking to the bar. He gets there before her and holds a spot at the bar for them. The text communication stops for a while once Tina lets him know that she's arrived, and so she goes inside to meet him and their date begins. They were in there for about an hour before Tina had to cut the date short due to being completely uncomfortable. She says from the first minute, she knew something about his vibe was off, that he just had a weird aura. She didn't like the way he looked at her, or his mannerisms, or his conversational skills. She found that he'd laugh at uncomfortable things and ask inappropriate questions, and even make weird faces, mostly with his eyes. Around the hour mark, she said she had to head home. Richard insisted he'd walk her home instead of having her Uber. Tina, at the time, says she was way too nice to people and often couldn't say no to things, so she reluctantly agreed to let him walk her home. It was a 20-minute walk, and the whole time she still felt the same unusual energy he'd given off inside the bar. She tried to be short with her answers to him. By the time they got to her apartment, he initiated a hug goodbye at the front of her driveway and she went inside. Not long after, she received this text: "Did I do something wrong? I got the vibe you were acting weird the way back. I was just trying to be nice." "Hey, no, you didn't do anything wrong. I just truthfully feel like we didn't really connect on a deeper level, and that's completely fine. But at this moment in my life, I'm just looking for that special connection with someone. I'm sorry, but I wish you the best. You were very nice." What? It was one date. Obviously, you won't feel a deeper connection immediately. That's what getting to know someone is. It takes multiple dates. "I'm sorry, I just don't think I'm interested." By this point, Richard gets very angry and aggressive, saying things like he wasted $100 on her and telling her to get back on her stupid dating apps. But then after Tina stops answering, Richard sends a very clear threat that he knows where she lives now. Tina sends one final response and then blocks Richard's number. She hoped that would be the end of it, but about 15 minutes after blocking his number, there was a manic pounding at the front door, and the angry screams of Richard were coming from the other side. Tina didn't give any kind of response. She hid in her bedroom until the bangs stopped. When she went to look through the peephole, she saw Richard standing by the side of her door, hiding from view. She called the police on him, and when they showed up, she went outside. Richard was still there, so she showed the officers the text and explained to them that Richard was pounding on her door and she felt threatened. The officers gave him a warning and asked him to leave the premises. Still, knowing Richard now knew where she lived, she wasn't comfortable. In fact, she didn't want to leave her apartment the next night, and when she looked out the peephole again, she saw Richard sitting on the stairs leading up to her apartment, waiting. She once again called the police, and for a second time, the police came and gave Richard another warning, asking him to once again leave the premises. Tina begged them to arrest him and charge him, but they seemed unwilling to do so, saying he wasn't an imminent threat, shockingly. Tina called the guy friend the following few days to come escort her out of her apartment anytime she'd leave to be safe, and Richard was no longer there. But a week later, she received a text from a random number saying, "Are you home?" She didn't answer and blocked the number. Since the police department was unwilling to do anything, Tina ended up moving apartments because of this harassment. This next one was sent to me by a girl named Marissa who had been contacted by a crazy ex who she hadn't spoken to in years. She dated her ex Dylan on and off for 3 years, and in her words, she didn't have a backbone when she would see him. And even though their relationship was kind of abusive, she'd find herself constantly going back to him. After their final breakup, Marissa asked Dylan to stop contacting her and to pretend she didn't exist. This infuriated him even more, to the point where he knocked on her front door while her parents were home. Her father had to open the door to Dylan, practically trying to fight him when he wouldn't let him in. Things were finally broken off, seemingly for good, when the police got involved. Due to Dylan's history with violence, Marissa's parents convinced her to get a restraining order against him. This, however, didn't prove to be an end-all. For a while, there had been no contact from Dylan. Marissa had blocked any form of contact from him, but there are, of course, other ways around that, what with fake numbers and fake social media accounts. In June, 2 months after the order of protection had been processed, Marissa got a request on her Instagram from a random account named Kyle. It looked like a regular person, so she allowed it to follow her, but she didn't follow it back. Sometime in June, Marissa had posted a story on her Instagram on a date with a guy she had been talking to, in which she tagged the guy she was on the date with. Shortly after, the guy received death threats in all capitals from the Kyle account, and Marissa received a DM as well, saying he's disgustingly ugly. It was pretty clear this was a fake account now, probably run by Dylan attempting to keep tabs on what's going on in Marissa's life. After using Instagram's feature to block the account and any new ones the person makes, she hoped that would be the end of it. After a few weeks of no attempted contact from Dylan, Marissa one night was sitting in her kitchen on her laptop doing homework, when she got a text message from a random number. It was a picture of her sitting there at the counter on her laptop, taken from outside the kitchen window. She was home alone at this time, so it couldn't have been any of her siblings trying to scare her. She looked out the window to see no one, but the picture was clearly taken moments ago, so someone was out there. She closed the blind to the window and called her dad. While on the phone with him, she saw Dylan outside in the backyard at the door, attempting to slide it open. Marissa's father called 911 for his daughter as he rushed home. Dylan was calling into the house at Marissa, demanding she open the door, getting angrier as time went on, and she yelled at him to leave her alone. Dylan got so angry that he punched the glass and broke a hole in it, causing him to start screaming in pain and anger as Marissa saw blood gushing from his hand. Dylan was still in the backyard as police arrived to the house. Marissa grabbed the order of protection document to show them as Dylan was already in handcuffs. Dylan was charged and sentenced to 3 years in prison for violation of the order of protection and vandalism. This allows Marissa and her family some time to breathe and feel safe, but ideally when he's released, they should probably not be living in that same house anymore for their own safety. This last one goes to show why it's probably best not to entertain random numbers texting you for too long. This one comes from a young girl who I'll refer to as Nicole. She was 14 when this happened, living with her parents in a New York City suburb. Next door is another family of 4 with 2 sons. The sons are both older than Nicole and her sister. The younger son, who was 18, named Gene, had tried to talk to Nicole on several occasions despite their age difference. He was a senior in their high school when she was a freshman, which is how they knew each other at all. Whenever Nicole would be outside, Gene would conveniently come out of his house at the same time and always try to talk to her. He would often try to walk to school with her too. Nicole says Gene is slightly unusual, but she can't tell if he's on the spectrum or not. Still, in the past she's tried to be nice to him, and has agreed to walk to school with him before, mostly because it's only a 10-minute walk. Gene has attempted to get Nicole's number multiple times, and she always politely rejected him, saying she's not looking for anything with anyone at the moment. According to her, it was mildly creepy but somewhat innocent behavior, until he started becoming more pushy. When Gene started to make Nicole uncomfortable by seemingly waiting outside for her and invading her personal space, she started asking her mom to drive her to school in the morning to avoid Gene following her or waiting for her. This got him to stop waiting around for her, but things worsened in a different way. One night, Nicole had a boy from school over in her room. Her bedroom is upstairs. The two were sitting on her bed, and Nicole got a text from an unfamiliar number. The text was very unsettling and alarming, because it said, "I thought you said you're not looking for anyone at the moment." Nicole replied, "Is this Gene?" And he replied, "Maybe." Nicole asked him how he got her number, and he said, "You gave it to me, remember?" But she knew for a fact she didn't give it to him, and she told him that. He ignored her confrontation and said, "Who is that in your bed?" This brought the interaction to a much more invasive level, because now it meant that Gene hadn't just seen the two of them enter through the front of the house, but rather he'd been watching them through the window. Nicole looked out her window, which looked to the neighboring house, at a window to a dark room. The light in this room was never on, and it was thought to be a big closet or spare room. But since the light was out, she couldn't see if Gene was standing at that window or not. She lowered the blind and showed her parents the texts. Nicole's parents went next door and had a conversation with Gene's parents, and learned that Gene allegedly has schizoid personality disorder, but whether or not that diagnosis was accurate wouldn't justify creepy, stalkerish behavior like that. Gene never admitted how he was able to get Nicole's number, but there could be multiple explanations, like getting it through a mutual acquaintance or buying it through a public records website like White Pages. Whether Gene's parents' diagnosis of their son was accurate or not, Nicole knew something was not completely normal about him, and she became afraid to leave her house because of him. Nicole's mom continued to drive her to school after this, and for the sake of both of their daughters' happiness, the family moved to another house in the neighborhood not long after this. Gene has not bothered Nicole since.